Season 2 of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast, a place to learn more about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, expanding your universe of possibility in the world of health and well-being through homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
For the first time ever, AHE is offering our introductory course to homeopathy. You've been listening to the podcast, you know Denise and Al, and now you can get a taste of the classroom experience with our introductory course. This course is $2.99 and self-paced. You can take it at your convenience when kiddos are in bed or when you have a minute here and there. If you're interested in taking this course, please head to ahe.online.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
Here we are.
And can you just repeat what you said to me?
I'm feeling kind of French.
That's quite a hat you've got on there.
Thank you very much.
You are looking a combination of an Italian...
Think first. First.
Of an Italian movie star and a salty sea dog.
Not where I thought you were going, but thank you, I think.
Yeah.
I just thought of something.
What's that?
I think I might be jet lagged. That might be why.
Yeah. I'm sure you are.
Didn't occur to me.
Yeah.
Oh, I've been told to move closer to the microphone.
Yeah, there you are.
We have so much to discuss. We've been really remiss in our recording.
Oh, it feels crazy town how long this has been because, of course, the last time we did a podcast, I fell asleep.
You did?
Let's just call it the jet lag podcast. It wasn't about jet lag. It was the fact that I think there was that 10-second silence that that will forever go down in the annals of podcast history.
This is why sometimes I wish we were on video. Not a moment like now where I have apparently the salty sea dog Italian movie star.
Well, I've got a cat and a dog looking at me with interest.
Yeah. But because your face when trying to record when you were one day off of a, around the world flight was pretty funny.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't go well, did it? It was all right.
It was fine.
Yeah.
Actually, there's been some decent feedback. We were afraid to post it, but before we kick on, because we're finally getting to the podcast that I've been wanting to do for a while, Bob Benninghausen.
Oh, yes.
And I have my books sitting next to me. And
you need books.
I like references. But I have to talk about my new coffee machine.
Right. Okay. Advertisement begins now.
So, not sponsored, just to be clear.
Not sponsored advertisement.
Could you imagine having a coffee sponsorship on a homeopathy podcast? It'd be so cheeky and awesome.
Well, I think it would necessitate a whole episode on coffee and the reasons why coffee has some mileage within the field of homeopathy.
Oh my gosh!
We could do
mint
that.
Toothpaste.
And mint toothpaste.
And mint toothpaste.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And if you want to hear about that we did an episode, maybe even two, on...
And asparagus with long green tips.
Exactly, and being in a swing, and...
Yes, no swinging.
Certain things that should not be done in the middle of the day, nor napping in a reclining position, nor wearing wool close to the skin, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
If you're interested in that, you can find... What episode was it?
Oh, I've got no idea.
It was a while ago.
But all things historical, all things educational and philosophical related to the arts and science of homeopathy, here we are.
There's a cat purring into the microphone. That's Hildegard of Bingen. She's our 13th century mystic. 13th century?
I found her collar in the compost
In the compost, yeah.
Yeah, I think she put it there.
Really?
I think she had enough of it, and she put it in the compost.
That's pretty awesome.
It cost me $4.25 on Amazon.
Right.
It was pink. It had Hildegard of Bingen written on it, and a phone number.
And my phone number.
In small writing.
So the coffee machine, it's called Grind, and it uses Nespresso type pods. And I happen to love that. And one of the things I love about travel is all the different coffee rituals that one can make, especially when you travel like we do. Apparently there's a name for what we like to do, which is slow travel, which is the opposite of people who plan all the meals ahead of time to when people say we did such and such.
Oh, I hate that.
Do you? Yeah.
When we go to I've done Portugal.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did one cafe in Portugal. A lot.
Yeah, we're sort of funny travelers like that. We
Yes.
kind of take our time. The only thing that we've done in preparation for our trip to Italy next week is what libraries are we going to?
There's a few libraries.
Yeah, 5 libraries that we're going to work in. Anyway, but this coffee machine is called Grind.
The coffee machine.
And it's sexy. It is a beautiful machine.
You're attracted to it. Can I just say, before people turn off, that it is using the reusable and decompostable pods.
Compostable, not decompostable. Is that a word? Decompostable?
Okay, I take that back. Compostable pods.
Yeah, I wouldn't get one of those machines as long as they were really problematic for the landfill, and also I didn't want to have hot plastic juice, which is what a lot of them are, right? Or metal. But I tried this machine. I had some of the best coffee when we were away from one of those Nespresso type machines, and I had seen this one, and I was like, I have to have this machine. So I'm turning it a really old number this week present for myself.
Nice.
Yeah, a compassionate present.
That's very good.
For my aging, but I love this machine. Okay, enough about coffee. Can we talk Benninghausen?
Yeah, so there's a segue, because coffee's on the list of, and we're not talking about right now the Benninghausen pocketbook, we're talking about his dietary guidelines.
Yes.
My friends, if you find a copy of Benninghausen's Lesser Writings, there's about 30 pages of gold in there, and it is...
I happen to have one right here.
Right there. And it's the dietary guidelines for the public using homeopathy. And in it, it says, coffee's good.
Yeah.
So...
I mean, think about it. For people who perhaps maybe need it to get things moving in the morning.
I think so, indeed. But let's talk about...
Although some people
what do you want to know about
Benninghausen?
What do you want to talk about in relationship to the Baron?
I have an agenda. First of all, would you just introduce him?
Well, let me introduce him the way he was introduced to me, because I'm somewhat embarrassed that I first met the Baron.
Tell his whole name.
I'd been practicing for 6 years, and I was staying at Julian Winston's house in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Julian Winston being the historian and collector, and I was over there to teach a weekend with Gwyneth and Julian, and I heard him in the shower, and he was singing, and I kid you not, Maria, I've just met a man called Maria. Or however that goes.
I've never heard that story. Yeah.
Right, so that's West Side Story,
West
right?
Side Story. That's not the first time that we've sung West Side Story on this podcast.
I know.
I love it.
So, and I said, why were you singing that? And he said, because of Benninghausen. And I went, what? And that was my introduction. So I came to Benninghausen a little late, certainly not on my schooling. Very Kentian schooling did I have.
Yes, you did indeed.
And so, the Baron, and I'm going to miss a name, I think, but the Baron von...
Baron
Maria...
Clemens
Maria.
Clemens Maria.
Von Benninghausen. We're missing a name. There's another one in there, I'm sure.
I don't think so. I didn't...
Anyway, it's a great name. Clemens Maria.
It is.
And, of course, he was Dutch, born in 1785. And it's when I try and describe this, I go into it a bit more depth with the odd students. But, see, there was no such thing as Germany. But there was Germanness, and there was a Germanicness, and a German influence. And so while Holland was a country in and of itself, so was Saxony, so was Prussia, so was Schleswig, and so was Transylvania. Schleswig and Holstein, yeah.
Wow, you're really good at it. You've got all the lesser known...
I've got my German geography down, or Germanic geography down.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's important to realize that while it wasn't Germany, it was kind of Germanic in its orientation.
Yeah.
And the Dutch and the Germans have got a whole big dramatic history, which I don't think kind of influenced Benninghausen that much, because he was extremely well heeled. of noble birth. And there's a story in there, I think he was the something of the kids, and that always meant a military career. And he went, not having that nonsense. We don't know anything about him. He is begging for a biography.
He is, and I searched. I can't believe it.
Should we do it?
Well, we'll put it in line because there are a few. But let's definitely put it in line. I have all my notes in Obsidian, and for whatever reason, my Obsidian is not synced on my phone because one of the reasons that it's taken us a month to do this podcast is because I wanted to find some lesser known information about Benninghausen because he's having a resurgence. And
he sure is.
He really is. And that's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to introduce people to Benninghausen, but to really sort of give a little, background on who he is. And also, though, to really think about what, why there is such a resurgence, what it's about, and what it means in terms of the tools that we use.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah. Are you wanting more background, or have you had enough of me talking about his background?
Just a little bit more, because
I see.
You teach Benning. So as we're getting into this, we at AHE we try to expose the students to context for all content, because I think becoming a critical thinker in a field that is as sort of loosely organized as homeopathy, and yet something that is dependent on adherence, or as Hahnemann would say, fidelity to its system. We've taken so many liberties that it becomes really difficult to know what's what, and you sort of combine that with the information overload, the fire hose of the digital age, and it makes being a homeopath harder than it needs to be, and it sort of almost encourages people to sort of look for the easiest information, right? So context for content is something that feels really important. So along with that, we teach about the different contemporary methodologies using critical thinking to determine how to apply it. And so the teaching about Benninghausen has become more important lately because of the new wing of homeopathy dedicated to, and really, I might even say fixated a little bit on using Benninghausen. And I think what I love about what you teach is you teach how many it's like 4 sessions, isn't it? It's 2 days in full time, right?
It is. It's 3 sessions and then lots of practice. Yeah. But see, it's really interesting what you're saying, because, I suppose there's a piece in the middle. If we're going to talk about why he's back, why the Baron is...
The Baron is back.
One of the... and having faded into obscurity for, let's face it, for a lot of time. Yeah. Of course, the reason for that is because of the influence of Kent and the rise of Kent in the late 1880s, by which time Benninghausen is long dead. But the thing about...
Put him in context, because Benninghausen and Hahnemann were contemporaries.
Yeah, 1755 and 1785. Yeah. So he's 30.
Yeah, but he studied, with Hahnemann.
Well, let's talk about that story, right? Because
what that means in the 18th century.
There's a whole lot of stuff that I'd love to know more about, especially the formative years and the teenage years. But the only thing we really know about Benninghausen is that he goes to university. He doesn't do a military career. He goes to university and he studies law. Yeah. And he studies, what we would today call biology or botany. Yeah. And but he also did do a few medical subjects. Yeah. He got a good, what we call probably liberal arts with a bit of
pre-med.
Yeah, right.
Right, 18th century pre-med.
Yeah, and so he came out of university and got himself a post with the Baron, but I think it was King. It's not Leopold. It was whoever was leading the nation of Holland at that time. But his nature is driving him, And his nature is interesting because he really is the perfect taxonomist.
Yes.
Right? He's a lawyer. He's thinking lawyerly thoughts. And when you think lawyer and what lawyers do, lawyers apply a framework to a set of facts. A framework to facts. And that's all they do, pretty much, isn't it? Apart from make a lot of money. And he has got above everything else, he's got that skill set. And then, he goes deeper into his life. And the next really critical thing about him, other than his educational background, is the fact that he almost died in 1828. So 1828, he is now 15, 30. He's in his late 30s. And in 1828, he gets TB, tuberculosis.
You got the black lung, Pop.
He got the black lung. He and he wrote to all of his mates to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Including someone that he hadn't really been in contact with for a while, a physician that he'd studied with, and who subsequently had found Hahnemann. Now, in 1828, you know what Hahnemann's doing? He's just polishing the chronic diseases.
He sure is.
And working on the 4th edition of the Organon.
Yeah.
And Hahnemann at that time has a massive problem. So Bönninghausen writes to his mates. Weir is the name of the physician.
Yeah, Weihe.
Yeah. Gives him, sends a letter back saying, wait, attention, what symptoms do you have? He doesn't say attention because that's French. And he says, by mail, extraordinary. I mean, really, think about it.
Yeah.
Distance medicine at its finest.
Hahnemann invented telemedicine.
Oh, my God. And so the symptoms pointed Weir in the direction of pulsatilla, which, when you think about it, is also an extraordinary remedy to think of in active and advanced tuberculosis.
Exactly.
And he's cured, and immediately. And you can imagine, just that, you know what happens when your health changes at any point in your life. But he's heading on for his 40s, if I do my math right. And so, Boomfa, he has his epiphany, he has his conversion moment, and then he's on the job. And the first thing he does is he writes to Hahnemann.
Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't? And then the next thing is he says, how can I be useful? Boom.
Yeah.
And that's the minute, that could be the movie, the opening of the movie scene, because you could have Anthony Hopkins as the old Hahnemann holding his head in his hand with this problem. And then there's Bönninghausen, I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio, maybe someone a bit younger. Why is he the perfect guy? Because of his taxonomical framework.
He stepped in with the exact skills that were needed for the job at hand, because Hahnemann was at such an interesting time. At 1828, he's just published Chronic Diseases. He's also, with the publication of Chronic Diseases, he's got all of these new provings.
Yes.
Right? So he says, he's made this discovery for which an entirely new set of medicaments was required. And he's, he went from Materia Medica Pura to Chronic Diseases, new medicines, reconfiguration of everything. And he's starting to change his thinking. And in that, he was developing an index. And one of the challenges was, as anyone who knows, you've got your own notes for something, you know how to find things, but it's hard for someone who doesn't have all the institutional knowledge and the, sort of funny ways that when you're building a body of knowledge and all this sort of inductive process is taking place, the links that happen in one's own mind are not always obvious to someone else. Hahnemann was able to sort of use that to find things. He knew the medicines from many of which having been proven on himself, right? So he's got not only his sort of academic knowledge, but he's also got his systemic knowledge. He experienced and felt these symptoms when he did provings.
Right.
Now he's trying to grow this medicine, and he's stuck. And along comes Benninghausen.
Do you know there's another part of the movie? Look, imagine, because this is true, this part.
Yeah.
Because the way I do it, he gets on his mobile phone and he calls his publisher and says, hello, send me a copy of my Materia Medica Pura, please.
And the publisher said...
And we know this to be true because we've got it.
Yeah.
And what he did is he got a version of his book and he tore out all the pages and then he tore all the symptoms.
Yeah.
So he not only tore down the spine, but then across every page to create clumps of symptoms, because Materia Medica Pura is a book compiled by medicine.
Yeah.
The medicine and then the carpet rolls. But he needs a different book. His problem is he can't remember all the symptoms. There's too much information.
Is that in Italy, in the, what's the place at Piazza Navona?
I don't think
like
so.
The archives. There's that big, not archives, but the...
I don't think so. And
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but I think it's in...
So let me just explain
Isn't it
what
in
I'm
Stuttgart?
talking about. It might be. This is the only one that I've seen. I haven't seen that collection, but in Italy, it's not. Well, I guess you would call it the archives.
It's on the corner of the Piazza Navona.
It's at Piazza Navona, and it's upstairs, and there are these archives there, and there's this big framed piece of paper that has it's divided into columns.
And they're basically sellotaped all down.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I have no memory of that.
I have a picture of it. I'm going to find it.
Got it.
I'll show it to you and the picture's not great because of the glare, because it's behind glass, but
the point being made is that the problem is there's too much information. Hahnemann can't remember it. He's trying to teach a new generation of homeopaths, and how can we manage all of this information?
Yeah.
And then Benninghausen says, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I can knock that off really quickly.
I was built for this.
You know, it's like having a conversation with Wendy.
Yeah.
And she listens and she says, yeah, I'll do that by tomorrow.
Wendy is one of our grads who works with us, who is a spreadsheet queen, and she does things that one can only dream about using Excel.
Excel spreadsheets and data management.
It's unbelievable.
It really
and
is.
Workflow.
Yeah.
So she's sort of like our Benninghausen.
She is.
Maybe we should start calling her. By the way, I got the full name is Baron Clemens Maria Franz. That's what we were missing, was the Franz von Benninghausen.
Right, got it. So I love that arc. That's such a great story, because he could have, I don't know, got into his 40s. He could have just, had a midlife crisis and bought a new carriage or had an affair or something. But he doesn't. He finds Hahnemann. And Hahnemann goes, oh my God, are you kidding? And
I've been waiting for you.
Yeah. And, think about it. Hahnemann's first wife is dead.
Yeah.
He is being looked after by the daughters. 2
daughters.
In
this
Curtin.
is before.
It's not exciting times.
No, he's in Curtin, and he doesn't know what's around the corner for him.
Oh, my
this
Lord.
Is before Hahnemann becomes a cougar.
Right.
When Melanie arrives.
So he's got another, let's say 7 years before that nonsense.
Right.
But he's then got the perfect person. Now, within a year, Benninghausen's already written a couple of books.
Yeah.
And he doesn't start with the repertory, although he's clearly working on it.
Yeah.
His first repertory is in 2 parts. And the reason that then there's this sort of weird fight in homeopathy is who wrote the first repertory. And there is a legitimate argument that it's Jahr, Jahr, that got the first book out. But at the end of the day, it's not right, because Benninghausen's first part of the repertory was published before then. In 1834. And that was the SRN.
If you're looking for
and let me just explain that, because what he did was kind of interesting. He created a repertory, but only used a certain number of remedies in the repertory, and only antipsoric remedies, as opposed to his second volume that came, which was described as remedies that are not antipsoric. in the title of the book.
Well, which is super important because
oh my lord,
unlike
meaning
and so interesting
other remedies,
right? But it's so important because he's writing this right after Hahnemann's publication of Chronic Diseases.
Got it.
And so he's taking this into account, which so what I was on the hunt for and have been on the hunt for is Hahnemann wrote the introduction to Benninghausen's first book, the psoric remedies.
The remedies that are anti-psoric. Yeah.
And I cannot find it. And what I'm sort of irritated about is that I have...
Is that what your irritation's about?
I have been... I only have the modern editions of the Benninghausen works, and they are devoid of some things that you need, like the original introductions and so forth.
I've got one delightful version of have a look at the...
Why didn't you tell me that yesterday or the other day when I was on a mad search through all the old books?
Oh, it's because it's really special. And look, it's right, and I don't know, you might have buttery fingers or something.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, she's off now.
Where
so that shelf right in front of you, middle book.
This one.
Yeah, that's it. Look at that.
Hidden in
you went
plain
straight
sight.
for it.
Talk amongst yourselves.
And so, off he goes, and he creates this repertory. He also starts writing books for the public. And this is, I find extraordinary. I think he realised soon about homeopathy's broad public health efficacy, not just for wealthy individuals. This was a medicine to assist people in epidemics and infectious events. And he wrote about, just as Hahnemann wrote about hygiene 20 years before, 30 years before, Benninghausen started writing about the things that people could do to assist with their health. And out of that came that extraordinary little booklet on the homeopathic diet. I mean, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
The homeopathic diet was in the offices of homeopaths all around the world, even up until the 1900s. There were charts on the wall of, oh, you're seeing a homeopath? Now eat this. Don't do this.
And the detractors who didn't believe in the capacity for these, diluted medicines to work said it was actually the diet.
Yeah, so it was the diet that was working.
It was the diet. As they would say now, it's the sauerkraut.
Yeah.
It's not the remedy, it's the sauerkraut and doing the GAPS cleanse.
Mm. So, then one thing leads to another. The big date, I suppose, is actually after Hahnemann's death, and that's in, of course, 1843. But Benninghausen then puts the two versions of his first repertory together into the Therapeutic Pocket Book, and that's 1846. And in that first book is the 125 remedies. And it's interesting because if you look at the lineages of the different repertories and just say put Benninghausen in its own track that moves forward, that really doesn't change. But as you look at the way that Kent's repertory, or it was never Kent's repertory up until that point, but say Herring's became Herring's Guiding Symptoms. Herring gave the job of writing a concise repertory to his students, I think. Lippi had a crack at it. Lippi gave it to his son Adolf. It was given to Lee, I think all of whom either went blind or died, or there was some sort of weird repertorial curse. And then eventually Kent's students took on the job of writing a concise repertory. By that time, there's 700 remedies in Kent's published repertory. I might just pull that back. I think it might have been 640 or something.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
It's in the 600s.
Maybe at some point it reaches 700, but where are those 700 remedies coming from? And you can tell that that's the difference between these two instruments. One is pure from the perspective of this book is the translated, non-negotiable prover's words from Hahnemann's provings, full stop.
Yeah, we know that the information in this repertory is accurate.
Yeah. as opposed to the inclusion of, this authority from 200 years ago says that gelsemium is good for gout.
Yeah.
So we'll put that in.
Yeah.
And so that's where the new remedies, or the 600, 700 remedies, that's where they all come from. And that's where the questions start to come in about the accuracy of Kent's instrument.
And then you have to think about the changes, the shifts in what we would call post-Kentian homeopathy. Not how Kent himself practiced, but how subsequent to Kent, his ideas were reconfigured to fit the times, which, especially since English-speaking homeopathy really grabbed onto the Kentian work. And if we jump across the pond to the UK, to then Great Britain, there was this big shift happening in trends, I would say. And so this sort of pseudo-spirituality and what we would now call like psycho-spirituality, along with what we also would call the occult, so sort of the mystery things, started to happen in England. That became really of interest. And so post-Kentian homeopathy, especially in the English tradition, got all mangled up with what was happening in the realm of psycho-spirituality, that sort of Victorian time. If you study the Victorian times or read Victorian literature, things like seances or this fascination with death and the afterlife came into play, and all of these attributes got woven into the fabric of what was considered to be homeopathy that had nothing to do with homeopathy. And so this is the part. So in your movie, this would be the denouement, right?
All right.
So there is
I think I'll reserve judgment as to what I'll have in my own movie.
Okay, fair enough. We've been watching all the holiday movies because it's that time. I could watch the Holiday over and over. I love that movie.
She cries so much.
Anyway, okay, going back to this. So what I would consider the denouement of your movie, it's in the history of homeopathy and the evolution of how we practice and how we use our materials. Two things happened. One is that the repertory, which was meant to be a very clear and clean index, gets botched up. You know that if you're trying to do a project and you've got too many people involved in it, mistakes get made.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is why we say to the students, or at least I say to the students when they get frustrated at, choosing a rubric where we'll say, not a great rubric because of the people who may have contributed to it, right? And they're stamp their right foot, make fists, get that red face as only a homeopathy student can do, and say, why? Why isn't this right? And it's because the repertory is an imperfect tool, or at least the contemporary repertories are imperfect because they were assembled over the course of 100 or more years, now 200 years, by a lot of people with a lot of different ideas about homeopathy and the appropriate inclusion of information.
There's this, while we're telling stories today, somewhere in Julian Winston's book, The Faces of Homeopathy, is a report from a conference where they got all of the participants and they gave half of them Kent's repertory and half of them Berningshausen's, and gave them a set of facts and said, and started the stop clock. And Julian's description of it is that the Berningshausen folks, found the remedy and quicker, whatever that experiment means. The way you're not wrong, but it's interesting. See, it's interesting that Berningshausen's repertory went into decline in terms of use.
Right.
It didn't disappear, but it was not widely used. It was widely used up until Kent's repertory. So that's kind of another 50 years of the 19th century. And then it didn't really have much readership or use. Now, in contemporary times, see, there's T.F. Allen's. So T.F. Allen, 1879-ish, has got a translation of it.
Yeah.
And in it, T.F. Allen does something interesting. He moves the chapters around, so there's 7 chapters. Now, that's important. I'll explain why that's important, because he does a cant and he puts the mind symptoms at the front. Now, Berningshausen never did that, you know. So that's like an 1870. That's a contemporary interpretation.
Hahnemann did that in Chronic Diseases.
Well, no. Let me explain why that's important. Because, okay, so that's T.F. Allen, and lots of people might have used T.F. Allen's version of it. You know, Demetriadis will say, oh, it's inaccurate. But at the end of the day, it's still a very adequate tool.
Yeah.
Demetriadis' version of it has 4 chapters, right? And the mind symptoms are buried in the generals, under generals and beside sleep, might be dreams actually. And so he for me, correctly interprets the importance of the mind symptoms in the general structure by saying these are important symptoms, but only as concomitant symptoms.
Right.
And so I think that really is important. By the time that Kant is getting going at the end of the 1880s, they start going, oh, fear of dogs, it's a really important symptom.
Exactly.
Well, it's not in the early, interpretations.
So this is, I would love to have what your paraphrasing of George Demetriadis should be in the footnotes of Aphorism 211, because Benningshausen actually talks about sort of the way in which the mental symptoms should be used in his introduction. Yeah.
Totally.
Can you just describe who George Demetriadis is for people who don't?
Well, George Demetriadis is an Australian homeopath. Contemporary, yeah. I mean, I've met him many, many times. And he is, let's say, the authority, the self-professed authority on the work of Berningshausen and the pocketbook. He and his special translator have taught themselves Old Medical German.
Yeah.
And he's also of Greek origin and is driven by a knowledge of good ancient Greek.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty correct in that. And he is strongly opinionated.
He's a fact checker in chief of homeopathy.
Yeah, totally. And he's, and so, you'll get very learned lectures and chapters on, the way in which, say, a remedy, I think the recent one that everyone got into a fluff about was Rustox, is misused. And he's not wrong.
Yeah.
But I think he's strongly opinionated about other teachers of homeopathy, other approaches in homeopathy, and that's him. So I use his repertory every day.
Yeah.
In every case, but I also use other repertories as well in every case as well, just to cross pollinate or cross check my clinical work. So I don't see it as the only way, but I see it as a really, really accurate way. And as Berningshausen and Hahnemann says, in all cases. It's like this book is used in all cases, acute, chronic, complex, difficult, whatever. Now, the one thing that I do want to say is that, going back to T.F. Allen, there's a modern version of T.F. Allen, and that's Heine Frey, right?
Yeah.
So Heine Frey has got another, so I believe Austrian, in terms of nationality, a busy physician, who I think is recognised in the Berningshausen repertory, the way in which the mathematical and logical nature of the use of it, and has gone plus research. And the plus research part that he's added to it is the Lex Rutten piece, right? Now, Lex Rutten is the Dutch. It's interesting, they're often Dutch.
Yeah.
Schulten and Lex Rutten is the writer, the more academic end of homeopathy, that said, folks, I need to teach about statistics. Mm-hmm. And the type of statistics that he is teaching is called Bayesian statistics. Mm-hmm. Bayesian statistics is all about probabilities. And I think he's looked at the way in which accurate rubrics, and usually the way that all of this happens is kind of in a non-scientific way. It's in an observational way. Mm-hmm. You look at a cured case. That's a non-negotiable cured case. Oh, what rubrics did we use to get to that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so it clearly worked. So let's now analyze how it worked. And it's an analysis and a statistical analysis of the rubrics that got you there. And by doing that, by understanding that link, you can then start making statistical probability statements about rubrics. Mm-hmm. And so he uses T.F. Allen's 7 chapters. And he is... Fry, Heiner Fry, is doing that. Lex Rotten's doing a whole lot of other work with Bayesian statistics. But Fry has been, walking around the world and teaching...
For a while now. The first time I saw him would have been in 2000 and maybe 10, 9?
Yeah.
And for those who don't know who he is, so he's got this, he calls it polarity analysis.
Right.
And he did his first big study was on ADHD cases. Mm. And it's funny because I was sitting in, it would have been 2010 because I remember some of the students that were at the conference and everybody was so excited as if they had heard something for the very first time. And I was like, guys, no, we do this already. It's just, you know. But what's beautiful about what he's done is just, it's simple and clean.
Yeah.
And
that's it. There's a cleanness to it.
Yeah.
There's a clarity to it, and there's a replicability about it. Which is when you use that the smaller therapeutic pocketbook, and it's way smaller, it's more manageable, and I think that's why. And I know you and I will differ on this one, but that's why for me it would probably be the best way to learn confidence in a style of homeopathy before learning the other stuff. I mean, it's just simply because of replicability leads to confidence.
Right. And the only reason that we differ on it is because there's so many things that we have to teach to get through in the curriculum that because there is a leap to be made. And you're right about the confidence part. And that's why so many people who have been taught post-Kentian homeopathy who... So can I bring this forward for a minute? Because this is the place where I wanted us to get, which was...
Happy to talk about this stuff. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and this might have to become a two-parter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, say what you're going to say, and then...
And then we'll think about it. Okay, so a lot of the folks who got involved in sort of the post-Kentian homeopathy, one of the challenges is...
You're going to hold that thought? Can I just intervene on that?
Go on.
Because there's something, I think there's another piece that I didn't provide some really important contextual information.
Yeah.
There's another German guy called Gibser.
Oh, yeah.
And Gibser and Demetriadis, around, I'm going to say 1995 to 2002, Julian Winston and Vermeulen were walking around the world providing a lot of information about the inaccuracies of Kent's repertory, and throwing up some very, very legitimate questions about why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. As you said before, a whole lot of the psychospiritual stuff was, let's say, pervading a lot of the homeopathy of the time, but it was the clear inaccuracies, like the typos,
right.
And the mistranslations of provings in Kent's repertory that were being identified.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of those have been fixed. But at the time, I remember when Vermeulen said, folks, if you're believing the scales, or the bold, italic, and plain type notations in the repertory, I'm telling you now, they're seriously wrong. Now, a lot of those have been fixed, if you're still in that tradition of using that repertory. But I think at that time, there was, Gibson in particular, was like an anti-Kentian. And I suppose was starting to shed some light. He was also discussing Kent's parentage, whether Kent was
We still haven't done the thing of Kent's weird. Kent may have been born of siblings.
Yes, Kent's 6 toes.
We wanted a 6-toed cat called Kent.
Called Kent.
That's another story.
Yeah. So I just suddenly realized that, I suppose, 20 years ago or 23 years ago, 25 years ago in homeopathy, there's a move away from Kent and the domination that he'd had for 100 years.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to say.
I'm really glad you brought that up because, and I'm sure there's some AHE students who just got their Kent's repertory in the mail in semester 1 are going like, wait a second.
You make us buy this thing?
Yeah. It's a rite of passage. And if you're lucky, you get an old Bijane one that comes with a bug carcass and a bad smell.
Yeah. Well, a glue smell.
A glue smell. It's glue and
paper.
It's a very particular smell. Anyway, so.
Well, it was, yeah.
Okay, so now fast forward to people who are finding that reproducibility in homeopathy is very difficult. And if you were trained in that post-Kentian psychospiritual tradition, you were very likely following someone who, through their own sort of magical healing abilities and charismatic teaching abilities, started to teach a method based on the way that they perceive homeopathy. And those tend to be difficult to reproduce. I mean, you and I have talked about how some of the books that, we read in early homeopathy, I mean, like, I couldn't imagine having Carlos Castaneda in first semester homeopathy as I learned, at Misha's. I mean, it was just, I loved it. It was eye-opening. I started to see the world in a different way. But at the end of the day, I think those of us who stick around in homeopathy and who are practicing with actual sick people, you start to get beyond the sort of shamanistic guiding people to a higher place of consciousness and into what do we do about the kids that are, pooping blood with Crohn's disease at 4 years old. It changes you. It just inevitably changes how you approach the materials. And you start really looking and asking questions. I mean, add that to teaching where you get really smart students who are like, hang on a second, and you start doing the humana, trying to, make sense of something that doesn't actually make sense. And so I think what has happened...
Is that what happens in your head?
The humana?
That happens in my head too.
Does it? Oh. It's because I got you to watch The Honeymooners. That's a Ralph Cramden thing. Oh. That's Ralph Cramden.
Folks, one of the things which has helped my landing into North America...
Wait, you now understand Bagel and Cream Cheese and The Honeymooners.
Is The Honeymooners.
Yeah.
The Honeymooners is bloody brilliant.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. Anyway, keep going.
Did I ever tell you one time I was in college, my first year of university, and my dad was over, and he's trying to get... I'm studying for an Italian final.
Yeah.
And my dad wants me to see this particular Honeymooners episode that I hadn't seen. He's like, oh, hon, just 20 minutes. I'm like, I'm stuck. I was such a Hermione Granger. Anyway, so you find yourself in this funny, odd place where homeopathy is practiced in 5 million different ways, depending on the person that taught you, and trying to search for what is truth in materials, right? And so I think right now that this Benninghausen popularity is, oddly enough, given Heiner Frei's, attention to polarity, I think it's a polarity effect. That there's a whole lot of homeopathy that has gone away from the repertory and into two-dimensional systems thinking, right? In a quest to find more and more and more and more and more remedies. So you've got the folks, the TBR2 folks, that's the Benninghausen repertory, that's the sort of Demetriadis folks with, how many remedies are in there? 150?
There's 131. No. There's 100, I think it's 131.
131. Yeah, then you go to, I have, Mikhail Yakir's book, which I can't even lift, that has 10 million remedies, and they're just the plants.
Yeah.
You talk about a differential, right? So the other thing is, and maybe this is where we sort of pause for now, because I think we've given the context. I want to talk about the application a little bit, because as I've been spending as much time as I can with Benninghausen over the last few weeks that we've been talking about doing this podcast, I've been really thinking about it, because every time you teach the Benninghausen module, the students are lit up, right? And then we get to clinic, and they're trying to figure out how to use that within what I would say we do in practice, which is, using the Benninghausen idea, the fidelity to the system, the attempt to go back to the proving in everything you do, right? To do that in a setting that takes what the expectations for homeopathic consult are in a post-Kentian realm, pulling the best parts of that, like emphasis on simple language and all that we've learned, right, in the subsequent years since since our sort of origin documents, right? And how to stay faithful and with fidelity to Hahnemann's system and to the materials, right? How do we make all those things happen at the same time, right? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I love it. I didn't know where you're going with it, and now I totally get it, because the Benninghausen system is so applicable, except when you've got a morass of information that's come out of a long case taking, and the selection of your symptoms suddenly becomes the application of it suddenly becomes critical.
And this is where what I have found most interesting, and why I had to sit with this and let it percolate for a while.
Another podcast
is because it's post 1828, and I can't square the circle between the Benninghausen and the first repertory of antipsoric medicines with Hahnemann's intro that I need desperately. That's what I need. But how do you square that to the application? How do you square that to aphorism 171? How do you square that to, and Benninghausen, what I'll have with me for the next podcast is the notes that I have in my Obsidian about aphorism 153, because Benninghausen does talk about the strange, rare, and peculiar, right? And the importance of that sort of most outstanding characteristic symptom. It's just, there's so much that happens when you deal with a contemporary case, especially with autoimmunity, what Jeremy Sher calls a supermarket case, that I find very difficult to apply, to use just the therapeutic pocketbook.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect.
So maybe the next time we'll talk about application of principles and sort of how we have adopted a very Benninghausen way of doing homeopathy, using contemporary tools judiciously, and as you do, checking with Benninghausen's.
And a bunch of remedies that aren't in that.
That aren't in there.
That aren't in the book. Yeah, that's it. That's how I describe myself. I mean, if I'm talking to someone that knows homeopathy, I would describe my homeopathy as kind of Benninghausen based.
Yeah.
In a contemporary context, with reference and then with reference to the therapeutic relationship.
I remember when you and I were first getting to know each other, and we had, before we were going to take this relationship any further, we had to have a lot of debates about homeopathy. And, there were many, many long conversations. And when you said, oh, you're actually a very Benninghausen-based prescriber, and I felt quite chuffed.
Really? Chuffed?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, if you're going to say the honeymooners changed your life, I can throw in a couple of...
All right.
Southern Hemisphere words, but you were concerned as I was about your homeopathy. Like, you can't, that's a mixed marriage. That's tough in homeopathy. Like, you get somebody who's sort of post-Kentian, and
Are you kidding?
And somebody who is not. Right. So. All right.
That's it.
The other thing that you want to talk about next time is the announcement of the royal physician.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a conversation, and also I think changes in our structure, huh?
Oh, yeah. Quick preview, which is 30 seconds, and that is the AHE academic program. We've run it through the washing machine and jumbled it up a little bit so that we can offer our program to people who might not want to do the full extent of everything that we do, which is, what I call the gold standard of homeopathy, and that is, a semester that is all about critical thinking. So we are rolling out a program where you can study just the intro with us. I think it's a 30-hour course, but with people who are really serious about studying homeopathy, you can then take it to acute care. We'll have a full acute program. So if that's all you're interested in doing is just being able to be, kind of a home prescriber, but also able to take it to the next level, really grounded in, in Hahnemannian philosophy and, and again, with people who are really on it, then you can keep going if you want, everything you need to to take and pass the CHC exam, and then the gold standard, which is the critical thinking, the research module and everything at the end. So it's the same exact program, just made more accessible by popular demand.
By popular demand.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love it too.
All right, see you later.
See ya.
Home Foundation is hard at work. The practitioner-generated research network is like nothing the homeopathy community has seen before. Through the PGRN, we will be able to bring groundbreaking research to the world that will help protect homeopathy for generations to come. Learn more about how you can contribute to research at homefoundation.org. That's home, HOHM, foundation.org.